So with Transformers Earthspark debuting in Japan very, very soon in late October, we also have now our very first look at what Japan is going to be importing and, dare I say, improving of some of the Transformers Earthspark product that we've already dealt with here in the West. Amazon.jp put up a bunch of pre-orders for a bunch of Transformers Earthspark item that will be localized over there in Japan, and we got to see firsthand that a lot of these are going to be big improvements in terms of paint and visuals than their Western counterparts. Now, keep in mind, and we've talked about this before, all the way back, since the Henkei days compared to Classic, or even more so the craziness that was going on during comparing anything that was going on during the John Warden era compared to the Sakamoto Takara Legends line. The paint on those were insane compared to our Western counterparts. This has always been a thing, and we have this discussion even now with the Beast Wars Again stuff compared with the premium finishes that we get from our Kingdom and related Beast Wars characters there with Legacy too. So we're kind of used to this already, but now we have an example of this with a more mainline TV series kind of thing in our modern day, and it's that of Transformers Earthspark. So if you have not picked up any of these figures, you might want to hold off because you may get a better visual representation and opportunity here. Now, Japan right now is going to be bringing over the one-step price point that they're calling spot changers. They're going to be bringing over the deluxe class price point, which is called DX over there, just short for deluxe. They do that all the time. And then they're going to be bringing over the spin changer price point, which they're keeping the name on that one. So each one of these have different kinds of paint changes and decos, and we're going to go through these and make sense of them like we do here on the Transformers Slag podcast. So let's jump into it, and we're going to start with, of course, the one-step price point that we're familiar with called the spot changers over here. And we're going to start with two of them. We're going to start with the Megatron one-step or spot changer and the spot changer of Swindle. These are going to have an MSRP of 2,200 yen, which translates to about $15 USD. Our one-steps here in the West are $10, so you're paying $5 more for a little more paint for a one-step flip changer. But what is different about these this time around? So we'll start with the Megatron. So with the robot mode, and I'm going to post photos up here if you're watching on the YouTube, that there is, quite a difference in paint. The first being, of course, that the ghost emblem is now the more screen-accurate black instead of the purple. That was more of a toy design choice from a storytelling perspective because, hey, purple Decepticon. So the Megatron that we got here in the West from the one step had a purple ghost logo to kind of keep that Decepticon origin. But in the show, it is black. Same thing with anyone else that has the ghost emblem. And so they kept it black here for more screen accuracy. They did red painted eyes on this Japanese version. They added extra paint to his lower legs. They painted in his fists. So there's a lot of paint with that robot mode there that is absent in the Western Hasbro release. For the alt mode, the only major thing that I could really mention here is they added the ghost emblem also to the roof of his copter's alt mode, which again is very tough to notice in the show, but the actual show model itself does have a ghost emblem on the roof of the helicopter. So even the small details like that were kept and put onto this Japanese version of the one step. So nice touch there. When we get into Swindle, this goes into that take away things, make it more show accurate kind of situation. They added purple paint on the rimming of his chest. They added black paint onto the center area of his chest. They added a Decepticon emblem there. All things that are making him screen accurate by doing that. They actually removed the blue paint from the lower ab area of him that the original Hasbro version had because it wasn't screen accurate. So they actually removed that because it wasn't screen accurate, so they didn't want to have that there. When you get into the alt mode, actually before we get into the alt mode, they even added some purple paint into his knees and stuff like that too, so there's extra paint there too to add to more screen accuracy. When we get into the alt mode, you could see the front headlights of the vehicle mode are painted in. The side windows are now painted in to add more detail there that weren't before. And of course, they even painted in the back part of his vehicle because that was kind of not broken up properly and molded in plastic. So now it all matches in one color, and the hitch and everything looks really nice too. Keep in mind there is obviously going to be some hue differences between them, but unless they're really major differences, I'm not going to really bring them up because it's like, oh, his windshields are kind of a lightish gray to blue and this one's a blue. But I'm going to mention more of the stuff that's like added paint or taken away paint. If it's a really big paint swap, then I'll bring it up, of course. When we get into Optimus and Bumblebee, it's kind of the same thing where it's like, hey, Optimus didn't have any ghost emblems on him in our Western release for Hasbro. We have those added here too on his shoulders. There's a ton of extra silver paint put on his abs and the grill, as well as the side areas and the lower thighs. Tons of silver paint that was added there. They painted up his face and especially around his eyes to add a more like complete silver paint too to make a much more nicer robot head. His alt mode, pretty much it's just, more paint on the upper grille, which is more of the hood of the truck. And they painted in the headlights, so it's all there too. So again, just adding way more paint than the original traditional retail releases here have. You get to Bumblebee, it's kind of the same thing. More screen accurate chest painted in now instead of that weird fainted racing stripe just for the top half. They actually completed it all the way down to his ab region with the racing stripe, and of course adding the Autobot logo for screen accuracy, which was completely absent on the Western release. Same thing, the stomach area wasn't painted in at all, the ab area, so they painted it in with black paint there too, making it look really screen accurate. Even stuff like his little arms, his little elbows and arms were black in the Western release. This one, they're white now for screen accuracy. So that's a nice touch too. They added even some of a little bit of paint on his knees, which are actually supposed to be his headlights. Well, actually his rear tail lights in alt mode. The thing is with this transformation, they're kind of like faux taillights. So when you transform it, they don't really become his taillights. It's just more because the robot mode, that's where they sit on, I guess, more complex designs of it. So this is kind of like a faux taillight, but they are painted in, which is a nice touch there. It's actually probably one of the negatives because when you put it into alt mode, now those faux taillights that were originally absent and wouldn't stick out, now they're very noticeable in the alt mode and the car mode, but it's not a big deal. It actually makes the robot mode look nicer. And speaking of that alt mode, when you get into the alt mode, the big thing is the front hood now actually has the racing stripes completely onto the roof and onto the hood, which were completely absent with the Western release. So even these one steps are getting the complete paint process and everything like that. And the last one here is, of course, Twitch. And Twitch doesn't have too much different from them, again, except for like some hues of plastic and stuff. Essentially, her arms and elbows now have a little bit more paint on them that were completely absent. Some gray paint there. The collar area of her head now has some gray paint added, which transfers over also into the drone mode. There was some paint added on her crest, just a little orange dot that was not there before, just to make the final look. And of course, there was paint added onto her feet, so at least she looks way more like her show counterpart than that of the Western one-step version by Hasbro. So again, all of these are going to be $15 after exchange, pretty much. So you're paying $5 more to get a way more paint. They are scheduled to come out October 28th, 2023 on Amazon, and of course probably in Japanese retail too. Again, just around in time for when the show hits in Japan. Let's get into those deluxes because that's the bread and butter of our Transformer collecting. How different are these deluxes from their Western counterparts? Where there's one big difference here, first of all. None of these come with Build-A-Figure pieces. The Japanese Amazon listing makes no indication of a Mandroid or Build-A-Figure or extra piece. It's just always the figure, their weapon, instructions, and that's it. They're very thorough at listing what comes in the box, and they list nothing of an extra piece or accessory for a Build-A-Figure. That's a very recent Western Hasbro kind of thing with the Build-A-Figure stuff. I guess they just didn't want to kind of do that, not to mention right now as it stands, we only have 4 deluxe figures, and so maybe they don't want to just go about with a Build-A-Figure just yet. Maybe Mandroid would just be sold separately on his own or be a promotional item in Japan. Who knows? But so these ones here, deluxes in the West were $24.99, $25. These ones here are going to be 3,850 yen, which are about $26. So for really only $2 more, you're going to get a lot more paint on these. And let me tell you, you get a lot. They put a lot of, effort into these. Starting, let's start with Bumblebee and Twitch here. The Bumblebee has way more paint on his head sculpt. Again, there's the sculpt on his crest and everything is painted in, just to make it a slightly more screen accurate. His Autobot logo on his chest was made smaller to make it more screen accurate. It's much larger on the Western version. I don't know why they did that. Maybe just for, the whole point of marketing and everything. But the racing stripe is completed because they only did it on the top half of his chest. They actually completed down to the ab region, a little treasure trail, as we like to call it, which again is accurate to how it looked on the screen. So that's really nice. Again, I dig that they make the extra effort. They could easily leave out that paint, but they don't. They make the extra effort to put that in there. So that's pretty cool. It completes that whole look. There's more paint even put on his feet to complete the entire black paint that's on his feet to just finish that look and not just kind of skimp out on it when it just ends. In the alt mode, really the only thing that we could cover more or less, he shares the same stuff in the robot mode, but I guess it's just the hue. But again, there might be differences in the hue of plastic, but it's nothing too major. It's really pick your poison with that one. It's more about what is added and what is taken away, but there's definitely a lot more added with this Bumblebee. When we get into Twitch, man, oh man, like that head sculpt, there's a lot going on. So if you look at her animation model's head sculpt, there's way more paint that is completely absent from our Western release. And it's kind of sucks because I picked up Twitch, the Western version. Now I'm like, man, I really want this one because this one's really accurate. And one big difference is all of that gray paint that was on her crest and on her side, I guess we'll call it her earpieces, that were completely absent in the Western version are painted in very nicely on the Japanese one. Even small details like the side of her chest, there's this little small deco detail that is available on the animation model, and you can even see it in the drone mode, but it is not present on the American version. They painted in there, so that's a really nice touch. Looks really good. Everything else, more or less, is pretty accurate, and is pretty much the same paint level. I mean, I might be missing something here because of the angles of the photos, but it looks more or less the same. But man, that head sculpt is painted in like crazy compared to the Western one, and that little detail on her chest too. Obviously, her drone light is a different color too. It's even more accurate there. But man, that looks really good, that one. Let's talk about Optimus and Megatron, our deluxes. Optimus has a lot going on here. A lot of hue changes that are leaning more on how the animation model did. And while like I said, I'm not going to cover too much of the different shades of blues and reds, but the chest and his windows there is a big difference because they went with a black paint for his windows, which is not like how it looks in the show. And they went with something that's a light blue that matches way more how it looks, and it looks way better like that. Just looks way better. Same thing, they shrunk down those white ghost emblems that they put on his shoulders, and they made them much smaller to match how it looks in the show with a black paint scheme and making them smaller and more defined, which is way more appreciated. It looks much nicer. Same thing with even the paint on his face is nice, just completing it all. Even the silver paint on his wrists, it's very hard to tell with the photos here, but if you have one in hand, you know what I'm talking about. On his wrists, he has some silver paint that transfers over to the side of his alt mode's truck mode vehicle. They complete that silver paint for the entire run of his arm where they kind of cut it off with the other one, so there's extra silver paint on his arms and stuff on the side, which is kind of hard to see with the images here. When you get into the alt mode, again, that headlight paint is now colored in properly in the blue, so it's not that weird kind of orange. That silver paint that I mentioned on the side is nice. And what's really cool too, all the wheels on the vehicle mode and of course in the alt mode, the hubcaps are now painted in silver instead of just being painted a molded plastic with no paint on it at all in black. So there's actually extra painted detail on the hubcap / mags that Optimus Prime has. So that's really cool. The only negative I could point out here is his weapon. He has two of them. He has his gun, which is one molded plastic. It's not a big deal, his ion blaster, but his Energon axe, I feel that the American version is more accurate with that two-toned blue as opposed to the red with the blue on it from the Japanese one. In the show, it looks like he has a very completely blue Energon axe. So I think that at least in terms of the weapons, the American version's correct, at least in one case with the axe. But otherwise, overall, I think the Japanese version, the figure is superior in every way, shape, or form. When we get into the Megatron, it's the same story like the One Step. They have this obsession with making his ghost emblem purple for that Decepticon look. With the Japanese one, they bring it back to how it looks in the show with the black and everything. It looks really nice. They added more red on his forearms to kind of complete that surface because, again, it's this typical thing where they paint a little bit of it, but they don't want to complete the painting of the entire surface because they could save a little money. And so they kind of leave it out. And so they complete the whole forearm of the arm in red there. So that's really nice that the fine detail is there where it got cut off with the Japanese, with the American version. Not much else I could really point out except there's a little bit of like gray paint on the inside of his legs. So that's a nice touch too, but not many people will notice that. But they did add a little bit of extra gray paint. Then you pretty much get into the alt mode. And then the alt mode, it's the same thing like the One Step. They put that ghost emblem back on the roof, which was accurate and absent from the Western one. And then a little bit more black paint here and there added on the roof to kind of just complete the look, which again was cut off. They added a little black paint, but they just kind of cut it off. They're just like, oh, this is how much we could afford in the budget. And that's more or less it. And that's for the deluxes. And again, $2 more than what you're already paying in Walmart right now in a Walmart or Target in the USA. And you're getting way more paint. And it looks really good. Just you're not getting your Mandroid pieces. So that's the only negative I could really think of if you really want your Mandroid. And then the last one is the Spin Changer. And the Spin Changer, in all honesty, it's probably the one that has the biggest price difference. And you're not really getting that much of a difference. So a Spin Changer, which is our big gimmicky price point item that comes with our human characters, the Spin Changer here in the West was a $29.99, a $30 item, where in Japan it's going to be 6,380 yen, which translates to about $43.50. So you're talking easily $13 more to get the Japanese versions. And really, when you compare them, there isn't too much of a difference. There is some paint added. Both human characters, I can't see a difference between the two of them, the Western version or the Japanese one. Hasbro, Takara, they look exactly the same in terms of paint added. Maybe I'm missing something. But the Optimus one, the only big thing with the Spin Changer is they added, again, those ghost emblems that were absent. They changed the color of the paint on his chest. They don't like that black paint. They want it to be accurate like the blue. So if that's a big deal to you, it's there too. They painted the knees, so they added a little silver there. All the colors all around pretty much just changed a little bit to match more how it looks in the show. Not much else I could really mention, just the hubcaps in the alt mode were also painted in too. So, but the Robbie figure looks exactly the same. And when you get into the Bumblebee one, Mo looks exactly the same. And the only major differences I could say with the Bumblebee is, again, completing that racing stripe on his chest all the way down to his abs, the abs being painted in that weren't painted in before, a little extra paint on his knees. Now the extra headlights that were there are painted in, which they weren't painted in at all for some reason. I don't know why you would sculpt them in and not paint them. But so they painted two of them. They didn't paint the other ones with the American version. This one here, all four are painted in, which is really nice. And of course, his knees are painted in too. Not his knees, his feet are painted in also completely that were absent. So that was all stuff that was missing on the Hasbro version. But Mo looks exactly the same. And when you go into the alt mode, I mean, it's pretty much looks exactly the same, more or less, outside of the hue of the orange to the yellowish. But that also might be the lighting of the photos. We will see with that. And that's it for Earthspark thus far. It looks like that's all they're going to be bringing over for the time being. We'll see how the sales go in Japan and how the show is received when it makes its debut in late October, along with this toy line. And then we'll see what else is brought over there. But so far, if you're looking for your best versions of these characters from the show, looks like Japan is going to be the one to deliver. So put your money aside, because outside of factoring in shipping and stuff, they're more or less comparable in terms of price for what you're getting. So pretty good stuff. Let me know what you think, guys. Pretty exciting. I mean, right now, as of this recording, there's been a lot of Earthspark stuff going on sale locally, both in Canada and in the United States for Earthspark, because it hasn't been really moving as a product on the shelves right now. But at the same time, if you're someone who really enjoys the show, regardless of how well it's doing, you might have a better opportunity if you pick up the Japanese versions, because you'll get some better product. And who knows how those will age too in terms of value, where these will be the definitive ways to get some of these characters. Let me know what you think otherwise, guys. And I'll talk to you again real soon here on the Transformer Slag podcast, and I hope you enjoy your week.